everyone. This is Justin, and I thought it'd be a good time to provide another update on my game development process. So what you can see here, and I won't dive in too deep to the right-hand side of the screen there, but what you can see here is basically an overview of the first area of the game and what I've been working on building out. So here's the first town here that I showed in the first devlog, as well as some progress that I've made on my first route will ultimately become my first dungeons here in some of the caves, and then where you'll transition into the next area, which I'll get into building once, like I said earlier, once I get some of my main game systems built out. So I wanted to take the time to explain a couple of the improvements that I've made since the last video, as well as do a little bit of a deeper dive into where I go moving forward. So the first main improvement that I want to discuss as I make my way down into town here is some of the stuff that I brought up during our first video, mainly in relation to signs, dialogue, NPCs, really just any sort of interactable object. So as we come to my first town here, we see that I have my sign that I had present in the first video. But now when you walk into range, an indicator pops up to let you know that you can read the sign, and as soon as you press the spacebar, you can tell that we have a sign to let you know that you're in Little Elk. That's what I named my first town for now. I also did some work on programming my NPC, which you can see down here. He's not perfect, but I'm fairly happy with the randomness of the movement, the wait time. I think it gets fairly close to what you would see in games like Pokemon or Zelda or something like that. And as you get close, he stops, he can't move anymore, except that little animation that I still need to fix. You get the indicator to let you know that you can talk to the NPC, and very similar to a sign, you can pull it up, get some dialogue, get a little bit of an understanding of the world, and move on. So those were really the two big developments that I've been working on, as well as some artwork kind of in the background, and as I mentioned earlier, some of the stuff here on the first route. But moving forward, I think I'm going to have a pretty major change to the project. So for right now, I'm really happy with how the game looks. I think the pixel art has come a long way, and I'm really happy with all of that. But what I'm not quite happy with is how the game plays. So when I first set out to make this game, I was looking at something more akin to a Zelda game, where combat was done in real time. So when I was developing my movement system, I did it on kind of, I guess you could consider it more of a free-form movement, where I'm not necessarily moving by tiles, I'm moving, I can move a little bit, I can move a lot. It's not a specified amount of movement for each click of the button. Now, games like Pokemon, which use a turn-based combat system, have what's considered tile-based movement. So as you can see probably in the background here, basically any sort of ground artwork that's done for a game like this is done in tiles that are then repeated over and over and over again to create the scene. So in this case, I have a bunch of grass tiles repeated over and over again. In a game like Pokemon, when you press the move button once, you move one complete tile over. And this makes things like programming NPCs, programming combat encounters and trainers and things like that. Well, in this case, it wouldn't be trainers, it would be outlaws, bandits, anything like that. It makes those things a lot easier because you have a lot less variables to control for. So for example, when I come up to this NPC here, I could be approaching him from kind of a diagonal to where he's looking. And in a case like that, he doesn't really know where to look. He's kind of looking at me, but not really looking at me. Whereas if I make this more of a tile-based approach, I can really only approach him from 4 main directions. So I think what I might end up doing is not scrapping the whole project that I've got so far, but really retooling my entire movement system to make it more of a tile-based movement. So I'm not certain exactly what lengths that will require, but I think that's really going to be my next step and where I'm going to spend most of my time. So hopefully when I come back for another one of these, the game itself won't look too different, but the way that my NPC behaves, the way he interacts with me, I'll be able to make it so he snaps to my character whenever I want to do dialogue, as opposed to slowly turning to face me. Things like that, little touches like that, will make the game perform a lot better. And I also think it'll help with some of my longer standing issues. For example, when I come into my house here, I'm still facing the wrong direction. I think by switching to a tile-based movement system, the code will be a little bit cleaner, and it will allow me to correct that issue, as well as some camera problems. As you can see, when I come out of the house here, the camera doesn't just sit right on my player. It tries to go back to that starting point and then quickly collect itself and come back to the player. So some of those longer standing issues that I've been trying to work through, I think will be solved by moving to this new tile-based movement system. So that's where I'm headed with the project. I don't know what that means for my next upload. It really depends on how long it takes me to implement that overhaul, but I really think in the long run that will definitely be the way to go. So thanks for tuning in, and I will see you on the next devlog.